Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to accelerate their business and grow their team. I'm here today with Zak. Zak, excited about this episode. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Zak Zielezinski. I am CEO of GLX Studio and excited to be here, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, GLX Studio. Tell us more about that. It sounds really cool.
So GLX Studio, it's an AI-powered collaborative video creation platform for enterprises that transforms PowerPoint presentations into polished on-brand videos in minutes. Not just that, but lets you then create an unlimited number of personalized versions of that video content specific to a customer or an industry segment or use case, pulling in their unique attributes and context to easily create personalized videos for outreach, follow-ups, onboarding, etc.
Cool. I can't wait to try it out. There's been a couple of tools that have promised this idea of I put my proposal together, but I could speak it to you, but I could do that at scale where I'm not spending proposal generation time plus video production time. I'm stoked to try it out. That's really cool. I'd love to get to know you better by just knowing where you came from. How did you make your first dollar? For me, it was a paper route. Where did you start this life and how did you start being a good capitalist and earning money?
I guess you could go way back when I was in, middle school, probably like seventh. The internet was just coming online. I remember getting my first computer at home with an internet connection. I was in about sixth grade and ended up getting really into the web, right? From very early on, into like tinkering and stuff. Ultimately, I decided if I wanted to learn how to build a web page. So that Christmas, I think I was like 12, I asked my parents for a book for Christmas, which was The Complete Idiot's Guide to Building HTML Web Pages. I read it voraciously and started building web pages just in the text editor. That quickly expanded into, which was building web pages for small businesses in my local downtown area. My mother ran a set of salons and day spas and knew other small business owners in the communities. She ended up making some connections, and that's how I got my start building web pages in the mid 90s for small businesses in Bedford, Pennsylvania.
Cool.
Went from there. I caught the bug early on.
What toy or hobby do you think you had as a kid that inspired what you do career-wise today?
Definitely, I would say like that computer was instrumental. Other hobbies, I was into just like building things or taking things apart. For me, building businesses is an art and a science. It's a creative outlet for me. So I caught the bug early. When I was in college, I ended up starting 3 different companies while I was a full-time undergrad student, 2 for-profit and 1 nonprofit. And I was addicted to ideating and launching ventures from early on. One of the organizations that I built in college was originally the Entrepreneurship student group at my university, which I co-founded. We went from, I think, 5 members when we first started it, the fall of my second year, to 2 years later, by the time we graduated, there were like 50 members, and we've collectively launched 35 plus different student-initiated ventures, ranging from a hip-hop battle circuit to a mini hedge fund for investing in the stock market to a general store where some students actually bought a house slightly off campus and turned it into a general store and a coffee shop. A couple of my ventures launched out of there as well. We ended up running it like an incubator, but I've always gotten a lot of joy out of building my own ventures, but also helping other entrepreneurs and coaching them. A big proponent of not waiting. There's no better time than now, because my experience, I think it only gets harder as you get older to take that leap.
You built in your early career multiple products from zero to pretty decent scale. I saw that you were at Cisco for a while. You have an amazing track record. How do you know when the market is ready for disruption versus when you're too early, or what signals told you that, like, for example, enterprise video creation was right for transformation?
That's a great question. That's interesting. I had very little appreciation for timing when I was younger, and like my first couple companies. The more experience I've gained, the more 0 to 1 products and companies I have launched, and the older I've got, I guess maybe it's the gray hairs coming through, but timing really does matter. It plays a huge role, and you can have a great idea and really great execution be off by 6 months too early or too late, and just miss the window or not have a market to sell into. So I think timing really is important. Luck plays a disproportionate role as well, which I think some people will admit, some people won't, but being in the right place at the right time. But I find you can also, if you're focused, you can position yourself and influence luck, if you will. And if you're aware of timing and the macro, if you're in touch with the market and need a pain point. And that for me is often the origin story of ventures that I have built or been drawn to, having experienced that pain point myself personally. The first company I started in college was a used textbook buyback service. And we raised money from student investors and beat the bookstore. We paid students more than the bookstore was offering in credit. We paid them twice that, but in cash. And then sold it back for slightly less than the bookstore was at the beginning of the next term. We made our investors a good return on that first textbook flip. I myself at the time was a student and had seen this executed as a class fundraiser in my high school. I had a notion of what this might look like, but no idea. And I knew that from doing a little bit of research that school bookstores, when you're a college student, the bookstore makes most of their money on the used textbook. The publisher makes most of their money when they sell it new. But the markup that a bookstore would make from one end of one semester to the beginning of the next on a textbook was 60% the cost of that textbook. So I identified an arbitrage opportunity if we could just squeeze it a little bit on either end, give the students a better deal, put money in their pocket, and undermine the bookstore, which felt gratifying because pretty sure the textbook publishing industry is out just to extract money from students. And I've always had a chip on my shoulder about it. Being a part of that market and having had that experience and having some previous notion of how this could be operationalized into a business, saving students money, providing a critical service for the university, generating return for our investors. The only person who loses out is Barnes and Noble. And they're not going to notice it. It's going to be a drop in the bucket for them because they're this giant company. And so it did land me in the COO's office of the university a couple days in, but we came to an understanding. Sure, you've been soliciting students to purchase their textbooks outside of their exams. I'm like, yeah, I've got an envelope full of cash. You want to see? I was like, and the thing is, we have this contract with the bookstore, and if you're doing that, I'm in violation of it. We're providing an essential service for students and saving them money.
Yeah.
Like, I can't have soliciting students to buy their books in violation of the contract we have with the bookstore operator. I'm friends with the folks that run the newspaper, and I can't have you making it easier for the bookstore to take advantage of students on days when we're just trying to provide a service. We came to an understanding, which was, can't have you in the buildings, but technically the sidewalks are actually city property. And so
That's interesting. We just had to make a location tweak and
we
okay.
just adjusted our marketing and set up shop directly in front of the bookstore, like on the
Yeah.
sidewalk, parked a car, put a big sign, flashing lights up, and stood there with an envelope filled with thousands of dollars in cash, which in hindsight was a little bit of a rough neighborhood. Maybe wasn't the smartest thing, but it was a lot of fun. We learned a lot and we built a nice little business. So I think the timing was right. I had been a member of the market and was able to see an opportunity to provide a better deal for the consumer while disintermediating the large corporate conglomerate that was profiteering
Yeah.
off of the
Well,
students.
so what's coming up for me there's a couple of things. One is you have an amazing eye for opportunity. In law enforcement or special operations, they have this saying called violence of action. You could run towards the middle, grab your ball, go back to the farthest thing, or grab the ball and hit somebody right away. That's violence of action. I see an opportunity and I take a lot of action really quickly towards the opportunity. It seems like you have both of those in your DNA, the eye for opportunity and the violence of action, which is really rare.
Oh, I didn't know that, but I love that analogy. With video, I personally struggled through the challenge of producing enough high quality video content within a Fortune 100 environment. At the same time, I saw how PowerPoint really dominates everything in enterprise storytelling. That gap is what inspired me to go headlong into the video space and really focus on GLX Studio.
Yeah. So everyone is adding AI powered everything to their pitch deck. You've been working with AI and ML. We were doing stuff that we were calling AI predictive analytics around whether or not somebody would click on an ad or not. It's somewhat weird to see people emerging into this space that are really new. How do you avoid the trap of AI theater?
At the end of the day, it's not about AI for AI's sake, but it's about solving a customer's problem. What is the problem that you're solving? AI is just an enabler to do that more effectively, faster, or more efficiently. I have been building AI enabled and powered products for over a decade at scale. And I think it's been interesting to see in the last couple of years since ChatGPT came out, it's finally entered the mainstream. And that's really like just a new generation of AI, like LLMs. I never would have guessed that a text-based chatbot would have been the user experience that finally brought AI, machine learning into the mainstream zeitgeist. That's been interesting, but it's also great. AI has been around since the 50s and it's had some surges and dips along the way, but it's great to see it really going mainstream now. But at the end of the day, I think it's catchy. It's a buzzword right now. I saw some research actually just in the last week where there was, I think it's a marketer, he was saying he actually did some hypothesis testing on AI powered verbiage and value proposition messaging, like AI powered versus not for the same product, and actually saw the messaging and value proposition points that included AI powered and leverage focused on the AI performed far worse than those that made no mention of AI at all. The hypothesis being that there's a perception that it's not quite ready for prime time if it's marketed as AI powered or it's not real. I found that very interesting, even still. Personally experienced cases where leading with AI or the cool new technology ends up being, we think it's cool because we built it and because it's using this really bleeding edge technology. But by leading with the technical aspect or the AI capabilities, people's eyes often glaze over and it's focusing on the technology rather than the problem that you're solving. So I think it always goes back to what's the problem you're solving for the customer and how are you making their life better?
Yeah. The PowerPoint to video, to say it, is deceptively simple, but the execution is really complex, I'm sure. What's your moat as the tech giants get involved in similar activities? I find a lot of folks want to innovate in the AI space, but they don't quite know where Google, Microsoft are headed and what kind of features they start investing in. What are you thinking about the competitive landscape and competing with big tech for some of these features?
Ultimately, we're trying to put personalized outreach with video that feels one-to-one but scales to 1,000. All of the research, the neuroscience, the learning science, the marketing science shows that video far outperforms all other forms of content across contexts and use cases. When I was working at a big enterprise, we had to do content for customer training, for customer onboarding, for sales training enablement, for partner training enablement. So all of these different use cases, and we had the empirical evidence in the sales data to show that the sellers more likely consume the training content, pitch the product, and at the end of the day, actually generated massively more revenue if they'd taken the video training versus the PowerPoint or static-based content. We're able to scientifically predict with a statistical model that for every one seller, this 30-minute training, we essentially statistically guaranteed that we would see an incremental $12,000 in sales within 60 days of them completing that training. And it scaled globally. We were able to model out, if we mandate this across the whole sales force, this video training, we know we will hit $250 million within the next 12 months sales for this product that we had just launched, and turned out to be correct. It's now $1 billion business 3 years later. That's how I got focused on video. In the enterprise trenches, you're trying to break through to prospects, partners, even internally, using every trick in the book. And email and static PowerPoint decks just don't cut it. And that's why we built GLX Studio, to bring the power of personalized video at scale to the people who need it most. Because everybody's inbox is flooded nowadays. Outreach is noisy, it's impersonal. And at the end of the day, what resonates with people are stories. People remember stories, they remember faces, they remember images, movies, not just text and slides.
Yeah.
All the data bears that out.
I read on your LinkedIn that you achieved a 99.5 renewal rate at Cisco, which is almost unheard of. What's the difference between customer satisfaction and customer success? I think that's inside of that question. You're seeing consistent renewal and adoption at a company like Cisco, but you're willing to compete with big tech for a specialized feature. It seems like you're figuring out how to build products that create genuine value versus just engagement. That parallel to you being able to do that at Cisco and now doing that as an AI focused startup around PowerPoint to video, how do you see that? What's your philosophy around creating genuine value versus just engagement?
Yeah. So I look at customer satisfaction like a very discrete, specific metric that is often used in customer success, product success. It's a generally accepted metric. Most simply is point in time value. And is a customer satisfied? That point in time, generally it's focused on, you give that as a survey right after an experience, a particular interaction or engagement. Maybe it's onboarding to the product. Maybe it's a kickoff meeting. Maybe it's after 3 months in and you have like first quarterly, like QBR, like business review with that customer to check in on them. Generally, we give a CSAT survey that's time boxed and specific to that experience. It's a point in time measurement. Whereas customer success, I look at as the full customer journey. Customer success is all about getting the customer to realize value from the product that they're using over time. And that's an ongoing journey. Ultimately, customer satisfaction is, are you doing well at this point in time with this specific aspect of your engagement or value proposition or with the customer? Whereas customer success, I look at as the overall customer journey and culminates a SaaS business in ultimately renewal and expansion. If you can ensure that you are providing the scaffolding and supporting the customer from pre-sale through onboarding and supporting them to ensure adoption and ultimately you get them to value realization for the product, then if you can do that, in my experience, you're virtually guaranteed to get that renewal and you're likely to have at least a seat at the table for expansion opportunities as well.
Yeah. It's not much different in a services business. We can do the survey, but I think the way we surface that is like a really intentional QBR where we're asking what is the goal? What is the team's target? What do you need to accomplish in the marketplace? How can we help you align the services to what you want to accomplish in the market? And just take the time for that alignment is like super important. Like I love the early stage of product building because your early adopters are dictating your roadmap and you have that close relationship with them. And in a service company, it's no different. You're continuously aligning like what they want to accomplish, not just what is the work, like what's the tactics, but what's the strategy. And
What is the outcome? Because ultimately, customers are buying an outcome at the end of the day. It's often less about your product or service that you're selling and more about what is the outcome that customer is looking to achieve. What does success look like? What does it mean for the customer? And most importantly, how do we measure that success? And so by focusing on the customer outcome and the value they're trying to achieve and aligning around what is the way that we're going to measure success, or another way to put it, what does success look like for that customer coming out of this engagement and how do we measure it? If we can define those two things, qualitatively describe it, quantitatively, how do we measure it? Then you have your guideposts and you can use that as your anchor to steer the conversations and the onboarding towards achieving that goal. You can codify that early on as the yardstick by which we're going to measure our progress along the term of
yeah,
the engagement.
that's right. And it gives you the right to proceed around things like expectation setting. Okay, if that's the outcome that we're targeting together, here's the way the road is going to wind to get there. And here's the things we're going to steer away from on this side. You can really guide the customer. But if you don't know where your direction is, then you're just going to run off the road and the course correction is really difficult.
Exactly. If you don't make it explicit upfront and codify that, then the customer may have one outcome or metric in mind for what success looks like, which may not be the same thing that you have in mind or that your product supports. And so by sure you have that shared language and that shared set of metrics early on, then you can make sure that you have that alignment and you're working together along the way. And I'm a huge fan of customer co-development. And that's a core premise of how I approach building products and companies, working early, often, and very closely with customers, especially the earliest stage customer to really and bring them into the process for ideation, development, road mapping, and using beta testers to give feedback on what we built and inform what we're going to build next and what's working, what's not, how can we improve. Customer co-development and bringing them into the process is helpful from a products standpoint for supporting iterative, agile development of your product or service offering. In my experience, it's how you build customers for life as well, because it gets them invested in the success of the product. There's something magical that happens when a customer gives you feedback and then 2, 4, 6 weeks later, that thing that they asked for, it then live in the product for them to use. Everyone else is using all the other customers or other users of the product are able to take advantage of that as well. That rapport building and buy-in is how you build customers for life. I use that as a core tenet when I'm building anything, really deep early customers to drive and inform direction and decisions.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the earlier stage company is the freedom to really engage. I'm wondering, is that in like you've worked for Fortune 50 companies and now you've been working on GLX for a long time. Is there any other key differences or similarities, or do you think that playbook works at the enterprise too? You alluded earlier that at the bigger companies at enterprise, there's just more. There's like partnerships and there's added dimensions. And I definitely heard that. I've experienced that as well. But I'm curious how you see that differently, having such a successful experience at Cisco versus what you're successfully doing with your users in a startup.
Remarkably, I do think you can do it in a large enterprise as well. When I was working in a large enterprise, I was building a product and new business from scratch. That's one of the reasons they recruited me specifically. I was in AI. It was their first cloud native AI powered product that they were building and launching themselves in house from zero. Even though they have a lot of SaaS products, they historically acquire them at 250 to 500 plus million in recurring revenue, but it never actually built one zero to one, taken it to market from scratch. And so it sort of was getting to build a startup inside of a big company in some ways. Some parts that were different, especially the go-to-market motion, the level of resources and having an established brand name behind you, were some things that really are, honestly, when you're a startup, some of the hardest things to crack. However, from a product and offer development, validation, and customer feedback standpoint, worked very similarly. You could employ a lot of those same principles from a operational standpoint. I think the cultural differences of folks, especially folks that have worked in a large company only or been in a big enterprise for 10, 15, 20 plus years, is definitely a different mindset and culture. There are some new mindsets and cultural approaches there than what is there traditionally, but I think that's also part of why they brought folks like myself in to help bring that outside in approach and methodology and build a new culture that was more customer centric, focused on solving the customer's problems, agile, iterative, and ultimately focused on making the customers successful. And that's in the feedback we heard from customers. Those were some of the most impactful experiences for the customers themselves, were actually like, oh, I've been shouting into the wind for 10 years, but this is the first time I feel like someone is actually listening to me from this company. And that was fun. And what was amazing is just the built-in scale also. So building these things where instead of maybe your very early stage in a startup might have 5 people, 1 or 2 customers, but with a large enterprise, you have to rapidly systemize it. So you're doing it with 1 or 2, but then you quickly have to figure out a path to scale that from a handful that you can manage to what is the way that we systematically can scale this to dozens or hundreds of customers collecting their feedback. Then what is the process for synthesizing it, weighing that? And then we built a top tier program for very strategic customers on top of that. We called our beta customer program with just a few very large strategic global accounts. We set up a whole team dedicated to collaborative co-innovation and co-development with these top tier customers. Sometimes we would try stuff out and it would not work. We'd throw it away. We measured failure. That team, we set that as a KPI, rate of failure. Failure defined as things we try, build, and either don't work or don't transfer to other customers, and we throw them away. Essentially, my marching orders for that team of about 10 people focused on this strategic customer co-development initiative was, if we are not failing 50% of the time, we're not pushing the envelope enough with what we're building. And so that was their charter to try stuff that might not scale 20, 30% of the time. They came up with something great. We could bring it into the roadmap, and it really gave us a jump and provided disproportionate value for other customers, as well as strengthening that key strategic customer relationship.
Yeah, I love that answer because I heard an ad exec once. He is a public speaker at a conference I went to, and his whole shtick on was dinosaurs raising dragons. It was this idea of the dinosaur needs to have a separate area where they can create innovation, and they need to keep it away from the dinosaur. It needs to be like a separate approach. I've seen Sabre had Sabre Labs where they did 10, was it 10, 100-day and 1,000-day projects? And you had to do a 10-day project to earn the 100-day project to get it into a full launch. And they did this 10, 100, 1,000 kind of thing. So many projects didn't make it to the 100-day projects. They wanted to see that there was testing, and they had some of the best developers in the world creating these tests. And so what you're saying is, yeah, you can innovate like an earlier stage business. If you're going to do that in an enterprise, you have to put those boundaries around it. You're also going to innovate at scale, because for a startup, another 10 subscribers, it's like, hey, let's go out for drinks. For an enterprise, 10 new signups could be a recipe to close the venture. And so you do need to talk to customer at scales, do NPS at scale, Like whatever you do, you can't do it halfway. It's got to be systematic. I loved what you said, that the culture around it is different because we're not just doing this for the next 10 users. We're doing this for 1,000, or go big or go home kind of culture is going to be hovering over you the whole time. While that pressure is there as a startup, you also assess wins in a different way. Is that true?
Yes. And I think in a lot of ways you assess wins in a different way, but ultimately, whether you're a startup or a large company, you want to build products or services, offers, find the market, and find that product market fit. And I would say that's really 0 to 1, finding product market fit is most critical. And I would say that's one of the reasons why I keep going back to 0 to 1, because you get to be creative, and you get to work closely with customers and synthesize lots of diverse inputs, business requirements, internal context, customer needs, overall market opportunity, and then use that to guide what product features should we actually build and in which order to actually serve the needs of the customer in a way that's unique, that they will pay for, and also how do we make that scalable. I've fallen into the trap before of customization, and there's a difference between customer feedback and productizing that versus customizing a product for one particular customer.
You're almost reading my questions. Like, is great. That co-innovation with customers. How do you balance customer-driven roadmaps with visionary product leadership? How do you build a car rather than give them more horses? The Ford metaphor. A lot of people bring up Steve Jobs, like nobody was asking for the iPhone. It was a leap ahead. How do you balance that, the co-innovation? Because you're right, you don't want to start creating a bunch of bespoke features, or then you end up with this nightmare.
Yeah, it's true. Frankenproduct. I've met Frankenproduct before, and it creeps up on you, and then it's like there all at once. You're like, oh no, it becomes very hard to maintain and hard to build on top of, and ends up slowing you down ultimately. But going back, how do you balance those things? In my experience, I would say that customers are really good at telling you their problems and what doesn't work and why. And by the way, you'll hear about it if they don't like something about the product. But if you hear nothing, then it doesn't always mean they still might not like the product. But in general, they're less likely to tell you when they love or really like a product or something about the product than they will be to tell you when they don't like something. As a general practice, customers are really good at telling you what they don't like about the product and what problems they have, but they're really bad designing solutions and telling you how you should solve that. That's a core tenet of incorporating customer feedback into the roadmap and customer co-development. It's a collaboration. You have to set expectations that we're not necessarily going to respond or prioritize every single piece of feedback. We have to look at business priorities and aggregate across customers. In an enterprise, like at scale, that may involve some programmatic ways of ranking feedback, scoring it by the number of customers, applicability, the impact, probably some internal business metrics and impacts as well to come up with a composite score for this feature request versus this internal roadmap item. And so I think that can be unique, but having that framework in a large organizational context. At the end of the day, you have to synthesize the feedback, look for things that might be very similar or solved in one way that may be voiced by multiple customers using different words. They may not describe it the same way, but trying to understand if customers telling you about this problem they're having that they wish your product would solve, kind of really unpack and get to the bottom of what is the meaning or what's the impact of solving that problem for them and why is it a problem? What pain is that causing them by not having this feature or this capability?
That's right. And is that somehow unique to them?
Yes.
And not the rest of your customers? Because I've seen that too. We built an automation suite for legal services. I built Legal Inc. and I sold it to LegalZoom. And that part of the equation of what do you need, and is that something truly unique to you, is and that would come up a lot. Like, I wish you could automate OFAC checks. Well, you're a bank and you have to do a ton of OFAC checks. I'm not sure that the other customers we have need that. But then our approach was, there's a professional services branch where we'd be happy if you'll share the risk. And if that's really worth it to you, would you pay to have that built? And then using them as almost like an investor in the feature. And if it was really important to them, they would pay for the pro serve. You could see if there were other customers willing to give you the margin on that feature. So it's at cost to the first customer, but then your margin was really up to you whether you could sell it again. You had a little bit of Frankenware, but it was purpose built and you were reducing your risk by pro serving it out. I felt like that was a way that we can make the customer get value but just like this is not covered in your $100 a month subscription.
Yeah. And I think I really like that strategy about asking the customer, would you pay for this? Or would you pay extra for this? If we were to build it as a feature, if we were to have this as a capability, would you actually write us a check, pay extra on top of what you're already paying just for access to this? And I think that's a really great litmus test when you're talking to the customer about something they're requesting, a feature request for feedback or something, sort of forcing function for like, how are we just complaining right now? Or is this really,
Right.
maybe you're having a bad day? Or is this something that would deliver so much ROI for you that you yourself would pay for it additionally, happily, without blinking to have access to this? I think that's a great
Yeah.
litmus test. One other thing that I like to couple that with when you're doing it across multiple customers, is there a way that you can take this feature, this request or capability that one customer is asking for and make it generic? Maybe it's 20% more work than customer A wants the product to integrate with this other system they use in their workflow. One way to approach that would be an integration with our product and that specific vendor solution customer is using, right? And they're going to pay for that. Another way to approach that is, what if we abstracted this and said, what if it were a general integration layer that you could plug into customer A's solution, but that would also work for a different vendor, a different product for customer B, customer C, D, et cetera. And maybe that is 20%. I'm making this up. Sometimes it's not 20%. Maybe it's 20% more work or 50% more time and engineering effort to do upfront. But then instead of having a feature that only one customer can use, you have something that's modular, interoperable, and more agnostic that can be used across all of your customers, regardless of what systems they're trying to plug into your solution.
When I built DocWorks, we really saw that, right? It was more of an ecosystem of integrations. So it's DocWorks at the center of QuickBooks and some marketing tools. It wasn't to go build all of that. It was just to be the voice of reason in hey, if you work on boats, this should be your stack. And we had some virility that we were also doing service records for their endpoint customers. So there's just this way of saying, hey, this is the stack that we've chosen. And most of the clients were fairly service oriented. Like they needed that guidance. They needed that, okay, cool. You actually just took the world of choice and brought it into a finite set of things. If we agree with your stack recommendations, we're also working with a client in the auto glass industry. There's a really good tool that everybody uses to do their work orders, but all of the people who use this want an enhanced CRM. So we're working with that customer to offer a standardized integration stack between the parts supplier, who has a work order quoting tool. And I see the same thing in painting. There's a couple of estimation tools that people use in home painting that doesn't integrate with anything else. So all these folks that do commercial and residential paint are all like, okay, great. We have the tool that gives us the right price to quote, but we don't have any CRM. I see a couple of those service industries where they just need guidance. They just need go high level plus this thing, and then QuickBooks. Those three tools streamlined and properly integrated is everything they need. We're looking at some of that. Like, how do we just be the integration layer between a stack of commercial product and they don't have to think about it? They just go, okay, cool. I grow my customer list, go high level. I run my orders in this thing and my accounting is happy because QuickBooks has the data it needs. I think there's a lot of that still happening. And what I love about AI is it's pulling all the small businesses into an updated conversation about how can I do business better.
And what you're describing to me is it's like unifying the workflow. And I think we're in a moment right now. And it is part of like unlocking additional opportunities through applying AI in contexts, especially around data sharing, synthesis, and analysis. There's that piece. But I think also people are just fatigued with how many tools and software products they have to use on a given day and how disjointed those are. You lose so much time switching context between tools or copying and exporting data from one system just so you can then import it to another to then do the thing that you're trying to do. And then take the results of that and then plug it into a third system so you can then send a campaign out using that. I think the last decade, or maybe 2010 to 2020, It was like data integration, leveraging data, combining, synthesize, analyze, and begin applying.
That's digital about
Just
everything.
be digital and get stuff into a data warehouse that you could run diagnostics and synthesis. And if you're really trying to go deep, plug it into a machine learning model for recommendations or predictive analytics or identifying correlations between disparate data points that a human would be unlikely to find. Now I think we're moving to how do we actually unify the workflow and simplify the user experience across those tools. That was one of the also inspirations for GLX Studio, unifying the enterprise video creation workflow. In an enterprise, creating a video for sales training or for customer onboarding video, typically it's spread across 3 or 4 teams, at least 5 different tools, and multiple departments. When you get into idea sign off, then you've got to curate the assets and then actually the script, the storyboard, and their approvals every stage. And then goes to the video editor who is always oversubscribed, never end
Right.
backlog.
Yeah. And a good video editor's super hard to find too.
Oh, yeah. And
Getting,
expensive.
getting them to want to spend time with you is impossible.
I was going to say, at video editor, you're doing 3 or 4 versions of that video, getting feedback before you finally get the final version. And then that has to be signed off by 3 or 4 people. Then it's ready to ship.
Yeah. Where do you hope the world goes? Do you hope that the world goes to a video first communication?
100%. If you look at people's personal content consumption preferences and patterns, people go to TikTok, YouTube, especially short form video, and people want the same thing in their professional life too. They want to be video first. If you talk to people in enterprises, that's how most knowledge workers prefer to receive their communication. It is video, specifically bite-sized consumable video that can be consumed anytime, anywhere, on any device, and in bite-sized pieces. They're far more likely to even open and engage with the content if it's video versus text or email. 90% more likely to actually retain the information when it's delivered via video versus the same information delivered in a document or text-based format.
Hey, because part of your ethos, that's why we're all scrolling more than we probably have time to. But I would love it if my experience on social media was similar to my experience with email. If I was just like passively connecting with the people that I do business with, it would be really interesting. Anything that drives down email is going to be a win.
Yeah, and it's saturated. Email needs to be disrupted. Honestly, like I know back in the day, Slack set out to do that. But honestly, it's just become another black hole of messaging that you have to keep tabs on and respond to. Now, there's like an inbuilt expectation that it's going to be like real time. At least email, there's maybe built-in expectation.
Cool.
A day or so, but now Slack, it's if you're not responding in like 10 minutes, people are like wondering where you are, what you're doing. And so it's rather than replaced email, it has added to. And so I'm looking for someone who really on the lookout for something.
I'm testing out SaneBox. I'm trying to figure out which one's really the tool that's going to crush the email thing. But I love what you're doing. This has been an awesome conversation. I want to wrap up in 2 ways. One is from my audience, from anyone listening, what do you need, or what is there something that, man, if you could have the perfect person on the call for something that you need, the one thing I need the most is, and then how you'd like people to connect with you if they're interested in GLX Studio, they want to experience the product, or they want to talk to you, what would that look like?
Yeah. What are we looking for? Users, pilot customers, especially who work in businesses and are responsible for content, whether for outreach or internal communications, because we're really focused on personalized outreach videos. So if you're an SDR or a chief marketing officer or a salesperson, imagine going in, uploading a generic PowerPoint deck, answering a couple questions, personalize it in this language or to this use case, and then automatically generating dozens of branded, unique, personalized videos in minutes with no editing or production skills required. Imagine doing that at scale. We have one large Fortune 50 customer that we are working with right now. We are generating 50,000 unique, individually personalized videos for their customers as part of an outreach campaign. We're doing that in the span of about 30 days. It's by 10,000 of their salespeople. And everyone is dynamically generated. Every video generated dynamically on demand for an audience of 1, personalized to that customer, the products they're trying to position, and with a personalized call to action in seconds.
I sent out 2 proposals this past week, and now I'm stuck in the follow-up. I'd love to try GLX and say, okay, this was my proposal. let me send a video-based follow-up that reviews the proposal.
You could do that. You could even personalize it to that customer, that person within the customer's environment. And so we're seeing pilot customer teams report 4x higher engagement rates on outbound compared to static emails or just PowerPoint decks. SDRs are booking more meetings, sometimes even resurrecting and landing previously unresponsive accounts. Teams are saving 90% of the time they would typically spend scripting, recording, or editing an outreach video. We're able to do that at scale in seconds or minutes per customer. Anyone who is looking to reach more customers from an outbound outreach motion, please check us out at glxstudio.com. And feel free to reach out. We're happy to chat.
I appreciate you spending time with me today, and I look forward to getting the word out about what you're doing. I think it's going to be game changing.
Thanks so much, Ben, and love to follow up with you on those proposals too.
Awesome.